back to another video. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited for this one, guys. So in today's video, I'm actually going to be exploring new and updated concepts around the use of frequency centers and how they may have actually been using more than one type of ancient technology to be able to harvest the endless static electricity from the ether. I'm going to show you my first initial understanding on how these buildings worked, and then we're going to actually be exploring some new theories and ideas behind energy harvesting in the old world, and then we're going to apply these theories and ideas to what we see in frequency centers, and then we're going to have a brand new updated version of how frequency centers could possibly have been using more than one type of ancient technology to harvest different types of energy. So first, we're actually going to be looking at the frequency centers and how it's actually been designed for harvesting energy. So the frequency center sits between the positively charged atmosphere and the negatively charged earth. The frequency center harvests from the ether, usually through the tower and the spire on top of these buildings. The spire is usually topped with something metal. So now when you've got a large spire that's the tallest in the area, topped with metal, it's the perfect recipe to attract a lightning strike. And this is exactly the desired effect when you are collecting and harvesting energy from the ether. How did they actually attract a lightning strike if there wasn't actually a storm or any lightning going on in the sky? You need to create the perfect atmosphere surrounding these buildings. So I believe they could have been using frequencies within the centers that emanates out. So to generate these frequencies, they could have been using things such as organs, they could have even been singing. Their singing could have been powerful enough to create this frequency within. So once they've created this frequency within the building, it then begins to travel up through the roof and up the spire, and then this starts to agitate the molecules in the air surrounding the frequency center. Once you start agitating molecules in the atmosphere, it actually generates a static electric potential, and you just need to be able to harvest that potential. The top of the spire had the device where when it was struck by lightning, it could direct the energy down into some kind of technology or storing device within the building. I also believe this is why there are cathodes topped on these buildings. If we look at what a cathode actually is, a cathode is a negatively charged electrode by which electrons enter an electrical device. So directing the static electric charge through certain channels of the building and down into a device where they can store it and use it. So as the building draws in and discharges the static electric from the ether, this actually creates an electromagnetic field, because as the energy is drawn in, magnetic field pushes and repels off the ground, so it creates kind of like a torus field around these buildings. So when this torus field's created, it connects, it completes the circuit to draw in the energy. I kind of see it like this. I think the reason why these frequency centers were actually built on or near ley lines and nodes of the Earth's energy grid is because performing these energy harvesting techniques on a node or a concentrated point of the Earth's magnetism would actually encourage and increase the efficiency of being able to harvest the Earth's static electric potential. You also see as well in this experiment, when they put non-magnetized metal balls into a magnetic field, they actually spaced out evenly, and they actually created a pattern that is so similar to the flower of life. And we also know the flower of life can be overlaid onto the Earth's energy grid. So I think this is why they put so much sacred geometry and depictions of cymatics and energy within these buildings through, like, the architecture and the windows and things like that. I think it's because they knew working with the Earth's energy grid was the most important thing they could do when harvesting free energy. So that was my basic previous understanding of how these things worked. Obviously there's pieces of this puzzle missing. I think I might have found a few extra pieces of how they were doing this. So for this, we've got to go all the way to Yazd in the Middle East. this is a badger, which translates to wind catcher. Wind catchers fill the skyline of Yazd on tops of homes and buildings. This ancient technology is still used this very day, but it's not isolated to this part of the earth. We find ancient wind catcher technology from North Africa to the Middle East to Asia. Wind energy has been recorded as far back as ancient Egypt and even Babylon. Badger or wind catcher is used to aid ventilation within a building, usually in a warmer climate. The designs of these buildings draw in the air through the vents seen in large chimneys. As this air cools, it drops to the lower levels of the building, and the warm air rises and exits through the vents. These wind catchers in Yazd were said to have been built in the 18th century, when wealth started entering the region, and people would construct larger badger to display their wealth. So some of these buildings have pools of water, fountains, and even underground canal systems to help aid the cooling process. This technique can also be adapted to create ice. There used to actually be ice houses in the middle of the desert using this very method of cooling. And we will come back to the use of water within these ancient technologies later in the video. It's very important. So now I would actually like to compare ancient wind catcher technology and architecture with the architecture that we see in our frequency centers and how I think these two are connected. This is an ancient windmill. This windmill is still used to this very day. It is maintained by a local man, and the windmill is used to grind grains and for making bread. But I believe this windmill technology could have actually been used inside frequency centers, maybe not to grind seeds for bread, but actually to harvest wind energy, very similar to the way that we do today. So could they have been using the windmill and air ventilation combined to cool down the technology that was inside the frequency center? I have heard a theory that they actually had steam venting out of the tops of these buildings. Is this why? Or were they using wind technology to directly create energy like we do today? Or were they actually harvesting water from the atmosphere through the windmills, because taking the water from the atmosphere around the building would create a higher static potential. But with the large doorways and ceilings inside these frequency centers, I actually believe they were designed originally to accommodate these vertical windmills and the old world technology. So why were they building buildings with these huge windows if they weren't putting glass in there? I believe these buildings were actually hollow to allow the air flow through. So if we look at the pendant vaults and the ceilings in these buildings, you actually see a lot of the places there's little holes. You'll see perfect little hole in the ceiling in the center of the ceilings, right? I think this is the perfect place that they could have put and installed an ancient vertical windmill. Or also could have drawn the energy down through a device, through those holes. But take a look, next time you're in a frequency center, have a look at the ceiling, and I can guarantee you're going to see where there used to be holes for something in there. So the modern day windmill actually has the potential to create 1,000 litres of water a day through the condensation buildup. Could they have been harvesting water as well as other forms of energy within these buildings using these techniques? If this is the case, what are they doing with the water that they've collected? Is it simply a byproduct, or is it more important to this process than we initially thought? This is where I feel the electromagnetic field created from this static electric harvesting has a role to play when water is being collected. Could the EMF be creating what is known as structured water, or is also called holy water? So let's take a look at some of the effects of an electromagnetic field on water and the possible uses for an EMF charged water. So EMF can actually assist in water purification and disinfection, which is going to be an important point that I'm going to come back to later in the video. So water is actually diamagnetic and can be levitated at high magnetic fields. So this is a side note, but is this how they make water in fake space? And is this how they make humans seem like they're floating in fake space? Because if you apply enough magnetism on people, you can actually make them levitate. People are made of water. So treatment of water with an electromagnetic field of about 1 Tesla on mortar can actually increase the strength of the mortar due to the greater hydration. So this is a side note. Is this why old world buildings are still structurally sound compared to the modern day buildings? Because if they were using EMF charged water to mix with the mortar they were using, then this would increase the durability of the rock and the joins between the rocks of the building, keeping it sound. Just a thought. Water treated with an electromagnetic field may actually have a detrimental or beneficial effect on plants, humans, and animals. So the effects depend on the strength of the EMF. An example of a beneficial effect of EMF water on a living being would be the increase of plant growth. When you feed a plant with EMF charged water, it can actually grow faster. So we can see clues alluding to the structured water in most frequency centres. An example of this would be the rose windows and the ceilings, and again holy water and water spouts and fountains found around these places. We can see variations of cymatic patterns and sacred geometry throughout the architecture. Now, if we remember Dr. Emoto's studies on frequencies affecting the molecular structure of water, so he shows us how frequencies can be applied to water molecules and it would change the structure completely. So depending on what frequency was applied, he showed us that even one's consciousness can affect the molecular structure of a water molecule, and that it's not just limited to a physical manipulation. This is why I feel we are known to pray and sing within frequency centres. I even have an example here of my own experiment. I did this experiment back in 2014 and even I was surprised at how it actually worked. And this goes to show you that the power of thought is very, very powerful. So I believe that not only were frequency centres being used to harvest this free endless energy through creating a static electric potential within the ether, but they could have also been using the building to harvest water from the atmosphere and then structuring the water to heal those who use it. This is where I think healing spas and bathhouses and holy water came from. But I found something very interesting in a book I have. I noticed that an old illustration, Roman baths found in England, and these baths appear to have had a charging device within the water, and the waters at the time were known to be healing. They were healing waters. And then sometime between then and now, this charging device has actually been removed from the water, and removing this EMF charging device would have actually stopped the water from becoming disinfected and purified, which would then have left the water lifeless and susceptible to bacteria and disease. And this is why we can't swim in these waters today, because they've actually removed the very device that made this water healing. So the reason these buildings are no longer able to generate electricity or structured water is pretty straightforward. The technology within the building has actually been removed. The knowledge of this technology has been removed. And on top of that, the Earth's energy grid, the energy field, has been depleted. These buildings, with the insides gutted, that left as shells, they're repurposed as places of worship and religion. The religious statues are put in there. They put in stained glass windows with stories on there. They put in these huge doors to fill the gaps, and they also put gargoyles and all sorts of kind of demonic entities on these buildings, I think, as a symbology of them taking over the frequencies and then making them a lower frequency, you know what I mean? So after looking at these ancient energy harvesting techniques, I'm now going to show you my updated theory on how energy harvesting within frequency centers works. I believe they could have been using these centers for more than one reason, combining different ancient technologies to create a building that could not only supply towns with endless free electricity, but also a safe water supply using the Earth's natural resources. And of course, there are many theories behind these buildings and their purpose, but this is just my current personal theory on the whole situation. Of course, I've not got all the pieces to the puzzle, but some of this stuff seems to be able to fit very well together and create a better picture of how this Earth used to be used and how we can actually potentially get back there again one day. At this point over years, it's become more and more obvious to myself and many others that past civilizations were much more advanced than what they tell us. They're much more advanced than today's people, and I feel like when we compare the two, we are barely conscious of our own existence within this realm compared to the ancient people. But if we look at ancient civilizations and how they worked with the Earth, they understood much more about this place and how it all works, and how they could make it work for them without depleting it. So thank you very much for watching this video, guys, and exploring these new theories and techniques with me. If you'd like to support this channel, please feel free to subscribe, like, comment, whatever you wish. For those of you that can, I will leave a donation link at the bottom so I can continue making videos for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care, guys. Bye.